Good afternoon. Testing. We're working. Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to our third annual State of Ag report release. This has been fun to have for basically the third year in a row. We're almost touching COVID. So we're going to do this thing hybrid, right, as we get over this. And hopefully in the future, we can do more of a grand event in person. Thank you, those that are joining online on our Facebook live feed. We appreciate that. And thank those that are able to make the trek over in the rainy weather today, which is, I think, going to make the grass turn green, and we're going to be happy about it. So looking forward to what spring brings us. So the purpose of the State of Ag report, just to remind everybody, is really to encompass the entire ecosystem of agriculture and food into a conversation, into a dialogue, and into a survey that tells the full story. There's some really great reports out there that our friends at USDA provide that dive into certain crop production components, or there's other entities that dive into certain topics of housing and childcare and those things. So, but we're trying to take a whole look at this so we can say from the farm through the supply chain and logistics, but don't want to miss out on the other pieces of our economy, which are professional services, which is our education, which is our government, that all make this work in our region, our community. So when you're thinking about the State of Ag report, think about the whole encompassing ecosystem. So I want to talk a little bit about who contributed to this report, to give you a little bit additional frame of mind. And I know it's a little bit maybe small, but what I can tell you is that every blue pin is somebody across Minnesota that participated in the survey. So we had 376 people participate, and we had 55% participation rate that completed over 85% of it. Last year, it was 46%. So we're getting more people that are participating and answering all the questions. And so it's increasing our footprint and impact on who is all really filling out the full survey. And then what types of industry or sectors of the ag economy are they from? We have crop farming. We had a solid percentage at 28%, livestock production at 13%. We got some folks from food processing, from government, from manufacturing. Then we bump back up to 19% of professional services. We cover some nonprofit, education partners, retail, technology, and then there's a few others that qualify themselves as other. And sometimes what the other is they were in 2 or 3 of these buckets, and so they couldn't pick one, so they picked other. In addition, there is additional demographics in the full report, and I should have mentioned that. So if you go to the greenseam.org/survey, that page now should have the full report live on it. And for those of you that are in the room, there's the QR code on the business card. You can jump into that and you can see the full report, but there's a handful of other demographics that we ask in the report that you can check out as well. So change over time is really the theme of what we're trying to track and measure of what we're seeing. So certain questions we ask year over year to see what their feedback is this year. So generally speaking, do you believe that as a whole, the state of agriculture in your region is going in the right direction? So we're asking them from a regional standpoint, not exclusively as a whole state, but in 2022 here, we have 83% that says we're going in the right direction. Last year was 92%, and then 2020 was 76%. Now, I will remind you that this was taken pre-Ukraine, okay? So this was the focus groups in the survey were taken from January 1 through February 18th. So you could put that frame of mind in of when people are looking at the direction that things are going and concern that's out there. It was before that issue. And then wrong direction increased slightly from last year. But overall, I think the outlook is pretty positive. The next one is, would you describe your attitude about the economic prospects of your community in the next 2 to 3 years? And we asked them, are you optimistic or are you pessimistic, right? So we give them a choice. They can't go in the middle. And this year here, we're at 79%, followed last year by 83% in 2020. We were at 70%. So we're hanging up there in a good view that the outlook is still remaining positive, which is good to see. And then thinking about 2021, thinking back, describe changes in your businesses as they look forward to 2022. So as they were in January, thinking about this next year, what's your changes? And the fun part is the green is growth, and we have 61% of people that said we're growing, or their businesses. Only 10% said they're going to decline, and 29% said we're staying, we're good, we're going ahead at the level we're at. And so we're just a slight uptick from last year of 1%. That see growth, and actually down by 2% in the ones that felt they were declining. So moving ahead, I feel really positive about that, and it's definitely an increase still from 2020. This slide over the years gets a lot of attention of what is the threats to the businesses? What do people say? Now we added a little bit to this list last year, and this continues to get a majority of the attention. Now there is a few people in the other bucket, but overall the three main categories that get the most response, or got the most response this year, is talented employees, policy and regulation, and logistics and shipping. And so we continue to figure out how do we adjust and talk about those priorities. At the same time, we know healthcare, childcare, broadband, housing, capital, they're all critically important, but we only let them pick three. So they couldn't pick them all. And some people would like to pick them all because they're all a major challenge. And so it really comes down to policy and regulation and talent. If you go back to 2020, healthcare was in the top, or one of the top three. And we didn't even have transportation and shipping, logistics on there. So it's really kind of fascinating when you twist this and think about it, that it is the list of the top three. Okay, we're gonna shift a little here and invite up Dr. Shane Boyer with Minnesota State University Mankato, and two students to have a little bit of conversation and dialogue about talent and some perspectives from them. So come on up, guys.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome. Well, I'd like to introduce two students here as we get going into the talent, but James and Megan, and we're going to get to them in a second here. Talent, okay, that is where I'm at Minnesota State University in Mankato, and we had a lot of fun helping with the state of ag, but I just want to mention a few things here with the two talent questions. And this was, what business does your options does your business offer students to learn more about career opportunities in your industry? And you look at, again, this is where they could only select the top ones, but all of these on here, whether it be company tours, internships, job shadowing, mentoring, part-time jobs, post-secondary scholarships, speaking to classes, tuition reimbursement, others, and then unfortunately 8% don't even do anything with students, but we're going to work on those. The internships is by far the number one, I shouldn't say by far, but those three, internships, part-time jobs, and speaking to classes, were the ones that really stood out. And that's where I'm going to go with this next question. And that is to our students, James and Megan, on what they're both, by the way, if anybody wants to talk to them afterwards, they're both looking for internships as sophomores and juniors. But James and Megan, what do you look for in an internship, and what are you trying to look for this summer?
So just to start off, thank you guys for having us here today. We really appreciate it. And we're just looking forward to kind of sharing our perspectives. So I would say one of the biggest things that I personally look for is that I'm going to be having an actual meaningful impact on the organization, and that I'm not going to be doing just like busy work that the rest of the people in the company don't want to do. I want hands-on experience where I'm kind of involved in the daily processes and overall having a true impact, and ultimately am able to develop skills from that different processes. And yeah.
I personally am kind of the same way. I would like to be hands-on. I want to be able to dabble in almost everything, like get down and dirty if I have to. Like I've cleaned cars my whole life almost, and I also know how to do the finances, and I want to be able to do everything basically.
Okay, all right, thank you too. I'm going to come back to them in another second here. The next question around talent, and if you look at this, in addition to common benefits, health, 401k, does your organization offer any other additional incentives? And as you look down here, child support, flex time, housing support, remote office support, retention bonuses, student loan payments, and other, a wide range. But the one thing that really stood out on this year's State of Ag report was the number 2, flex time and remote office. Okay, where does that come from? The whole COVID, that wasn't there before. And so this is something that is really coming out that is being offered to employees, and it's becoming a big issue in the workforce. And in retention bonuses, we're seeing more of those to keep people, because the talent issue is such an issue. Once you get those people, you want to keep them. And so those retention bonuses, those popped out a lot more this time this year as well. So I'm going to switch it back to the students here again. And so when you're looking for positions, as they're starting to, what benefits, and you can bring in your concept from your peers, what you've heard, what are students looking for now in jobs as they're coming out of the workforce? What do you really want in a job?
So I think for me, one of the biggest things is tuition reimbursement is something that I'm always kind of looking into, just because college is very expensive. So being able to help pay for that is something that I would like. I also think what I've heard from a lot of my students, like peers and everything like that, is that they like to be able to have the opportunity to work remotely and do all of that sort of stuff, just because it is a lot more of a flexible work experience for them. And that's definitely something that I think has been significantly increasing in recent years, just with COVID and everything like that.
I guess for thinking of the future, I think about the 401k and how much it's going to pay, so then I can pay off my debt from school, and I think long-term investments is my thought. I guess I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to go real quick off to one other thing. We talked about the work, flex time in the remote office. On the way over here today, we talked about the remote. Can you just real quickly, what does the remote, is that encouraged? Do you want that, the remote?
I think for me, what I would prefer is a more hybrid version of that. So let's say, I know like Apple just recently introduced a policy where they're going to be having their employees eventually working 2 times a week at home and then 3 times a week in the office. And I think implementing a hybrid version like that would be something that's really beneficial, just because it gives the employees the best of both worlds. And at the same time, the employers are able to check in with them at the office, but they're also able to have that freedom to kind of do what they need to do at home. So that's something that I think would work out pretty well.
For me, in my experience of working remotely, I don't fully like it personally, because I get more lazy. And I don't know about others, but and I just like being hands-on. I like communicating in person. I understand things more personally, and being able to read other people's body language is a big thing for me, to know they understand what I'm saying if we're talking in person. And then if I'm learning virtually is a lot harder.
Okay, all right, thank you. We're going to bring you back up in a second. All right, so Sam?
Awesome. That's really good. It's good to see the perspective of how there is interest in being in the office, when often you think everybody wants to be remote. It's not necessarily the case. People are interested in being in the office as well. So appreciate that insight, James and Megan. Want to move on to another topic that we added this last year from conversations in the focus group and conversations with policy officials as well as businesses, to talk about the global workforce. So the global workforce to us is more described as immigration, through TN visa, through other programs that there are people to come to the US and work. And there are things that our businesses are looking at and rely on. And so the first question we asked is, do you think an increased number of global workers would help alleviate the talent shortage in our region? Okay. We had 29% that said absolutely, they provide option to grow businesses. We had the second one with 47% said possibly, but I need more information, right? Of how do we do that? What does that look like? And we had 24% that said, not likely. And I think what's fun, you'll be able to see in the full report as this compares in the different size of businesses and what that might look like. And I'll talk about it a little bit here as well. But I think it's interesting when you go back and look, how many maybe individual family farmers we had respond versus how many companies that we had respond. I think that changes the answer a little bit. And their second question is how's your organization utilize this global workforce to alleviate talent shortages? And we had 16% that said, yes, we're utilizing some part of it and it's been successful. And I think that's really telling that 16% of our businesses are saying, absolutely. We had 2% that says, yes, tried it, but it didn't work. There are a lot of hurdles to jump through, and I can see where some are going to be a challenge. And then we had 33% saying, no, I haven't, but I'd like to learn. Where do we go? Where's the resources out there for it? And then we had 49% that said they don't think it's applicable. So I think it's a telling story, and more important as we're seeing the population balance in Minnesota is balanced by our federal policy of people coming here that want to work and want to have a career that's better than where they came from. And then what we talked about this last picture here is, do you think an increased number of immigrant workers would help alleviate the talent shortage in your business by size? This is the one I was referring to, and I got ahead of myself. The dark green is absolutely, they provide that opportunity. So on the more than 250 employees, 41% said that it's important. And if you combine the possibly, but I need more information together, we're talking 82% see that this is a possibility. If you go to the 101 to 250, so the next business size down, we have 35% that said, yep, we're absolutely. And a total of 91% they felt there that would see some value to it. They're just not doing it yet. As we move into that next smaller bracket of the 50 to 100 range, we only had 20% of that bracket using it. And so that's one of those things that we're going to pick up and watch on, is maybe that's a business size that needs a little bit more extra support than others that don't have a full team to bring those individuals on. But then interesting enough, you get back down to 11 to 50 and we went back up to 28%. And then the interest of 43%, which puts them at 71%. And then the under 10 employees of the interested and the possible but need more information was still totaling 79% with the smallest of employees, seeing that there's a value in the global workforce marketplace. So this was a new question this year. I think we got the question right, and I think people responded to it pretty well. Now it's how do we all as businesses or organizations figure out how to create some action to help support that. So on April 6th, we do have a global workforce roundtable, and you can find out more on the GreenSeam website about that. Thanks for the plug, Garrett. All right, so the next question. Flip my notes the right way here. Are you using or exploring technologies to alleviate the workforce shortage? Okay, so we're asking them if they're using or exploring, and 62% said yes, we're actively doing that. 38% said no, not yet, which was kind of surprising. But that's the fun of surveys, is somebody else gets to tell you that story and not deciding it yourself. But 62% saying they're trying to figure out technology on how that will help the challenges that are in front of them. And then we follow that question up with, have you used or plan to use technology for workforce shortage? So not just, exploring or thinking about it, but it's how many, and then what is that technology doing? And so 17% said it's replacing open positions. Flat out said technology is replacing people. Well, it's not replacing people because we don't have the people. It's replacing the open jobs, right? I mean, let's be real. And then there was 10% though, people said that they are replacing some current positions. But I think we also have to remember that it's replacing a current position, but it's allowing those then positions or those individuals to grow and take another opportunity because there's gaps in a lot of places. And that will lead into a presenter that we'll have in a little while talking about what can we do to upskill people. So, and then there's increased productivity and process was overall 67% said technology is helping with processes and productivity, which is good to know. That's what we needed, right? No shortage of work or supplies that somebody needs today. So with that, I think we're gonna move back now to the next slide. We're gonna move back to Shane Boyer and Megan and James. If you want to come back up to talk about the next slide.
So as Sam's queuing up the next slide, the second part of the state of ag was 9 focus groups that kind of took place from across the state. They were virtually and in person. And so we moderated that. We had some students that attended. And then we documented all of that. And then in your packets, you'll see some more of the information on the opportunities and challenges, the themes that came out of the focus groups. And so there was a lot of hours that were on the back end of this that the students kind of helped out with, as James is shaking his head there. They documented all the words of all those focus groups to give us that data. And so I want to thank the students. We got a group of students called the Henze Ag Innovators that really helped and then came. So I'm going to kind of, before I jump into this, I'm going to ask these students, and Megan came to focus group. So what was your takeaway from the focus groups? What did you learn by listening and by documenting what was said in those focus groups?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned was just how many different opportunities there are in the agricultural field, because you can do pretty much anything you wanted. And it's just like a lot of people don't have the knowledge that these different opportunities are available. So you could become an ag banker, you could become a lawyer who your main focus is dealing with like agricultural contracts and everything like that. But oftentimes we don't really think of that side of it. We only think of the farmers and everything like that. But there's so many other different aspects of the cycle that we don't always think of.
Also, I'd just like to add that it's not like we always get promoted to work for bigger corporations, but like the smaller corporations their names aren't out there as much and we don't see them as often. So it's harder to hear that, oh, the agriculture needs bankers, they need lawyers, they need salespeople. And that's another thing that we just kind of missed out on.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you too for adding some input from the next generation that's coming up. So I'm going to jump back into the slide here as we look at this, and I'm going to flip flop this because I want to end on a positive note. So I'm going to talk about the challenges first. And so the things that I heard over and over, I shouldn't say but we heard over and over. Number one was the supply chain and the talent shortages. So you've heard that here today, that the talent shortages has been such a big issue, and as well as the supply chain. And again, as Sam mentioned, it was before the war in Ukraine. So it was even an issue prior to that, and COVID really brought that out. And so all of those were the challenges that were going on. Some specifics, we really wanted people to talk about regulations and policies. What was impacting the businesses? Prop 12 was a real big one. There were other state taxes and regulations that came out, and you can read again in the packet on some of these as well. Rural broadband was brought up, but not as loud it has been in the past. Same with housing and those. It was really, there was some of that, Tam talked about the immigration policy allowing us to bring people in to work. Those were some of the challenges, but supply chain and talent were overall the biggest challenges. But then flipping it to the opportunities, and that's what's so fun about all of this is there's so many opportunities that are out there, from the collaboration. How do we all work together? The focus groups, they're so positive in saying we need to reach out to each other, especially in these times of the supply chain. How can we bring each other up with the help of each other? And so the collaboration came out. Sam talked about technology, a lot of opportunities there that goes hand in hand with the automation as we're going into that. The supply chain, it's interesting. It's on both the challenges and the opportunities. And so when you think about, there's so many opportunities with the supply chain. And the one thing that came out in all of this with the supply chain was more of a local supply chain and not necessarily the international. And so that was one of the opportunities to beef up our local supply chain. And then the global workforce. More opportunities there. And as was mentioned, lots of workshops and how do we learn from others that are doing that. And then I'm going to end on the last one, and that's ag education, whether it be at a state university, at a community college. There's a lot of education that's going on, but yet at the same time, we need to continue to educate each other. We need to educate the next generation, starting with the younger. And I know the Southern Ag Center of Excellence is here as well. And the things that we need to continue to do to educate, not just in the technology skills, but educate of what's happening in the ag industry. And then the one final point that's not on here, and that is to tell the story. We need to continue to tell the story of food and ag to keep encouraging people to take a look at careers and positions in this industry. And that was, again, one of them, the story in each one of those focus groups. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sam to wrap this up.
That's a good point to end on that focus group slide that it came up. Everybody was struggling a little bit of how do we tell the story of ag? How do we tell it to our fellow peers or parents? And how do you tell it to a student that might be coming here to Farmamerica? Or how do you tell it to somebody that's already, has a pathway in college that, hey, you can get a career in ag and food? And every focus group did bring this up. And in some of the other comments that we received throughout the survey, which was part of the full packet that you can go online and see, is that definition or that message. But everybody's struggling a little bit with what is that perfect message. But I think there is no perfect message. I think every business has a great story to tell about how they grew, what products they offer. I think every farm has a great story to tell, no matter what side of the ag production spectrum they're on. There's a lot of great stories out there, especially now as we move into the conversation of key buzzwords that were brought up over and over again, which was sustainability, climate change. How do we have those conversations and tell our stories related to those topics that are of most interest by a lot of folks? So as we look for the talent partnership component of this, which GreenSeam has been pushing hard since our inception, is how do we create new partnerships? How do we bridge gaps? How do we work with those teachers that are really the boots on the ground? But how do we bring the businesses into that conversation? Because we can always point fingers at the education side or back to the business side, but in reality, it's all parties coming together at the table to figure out how do we work with this solution or find this solution that's out there. And in some cases, all the right puzzle pieces are there, or the dots are there, but they're just not being connected. And so I want to invite up our next guest, Kelsey Woods-Nord, who is a newer board member of GreenSeam, but she also plays an important role with South Central College and some programs that do bring businesses and education together. And so with that, I'm going to give it over to Kelsey. Thank you.
Starting out well. Okay, so I'm excited to talk today. Bear with me. I usually use about an hour to cover all of this, so I'm trying to fit it into 5 to 10 minutes, but give a little plug for one of Minnesota's unique programs. It's called the Dual Training Program. And it's similar to registered apprenticeships. So we have both registered apprenticeship and dual training in Minnesota available to our employers. And when we talk about building our talent pipeline and how we're going to address many of these challenges that came up in the focus group, apprenticeship and dual training is a long-term strategy for doing just that. Essentially, if you aren't familiar with registered apprenticeship or dual training, I'm going to combine them and just call them apprenticeship right now. They include a structured on-the-job training component that aligns with an educational theory-based training. And so the biggest piece of it is that it's employer-driven. That's the most exciting piece of apprenticeship programs, but it's also the most challenging piece because you really have to take a minute to look at your occupations. What are your needs? Where are your gaps? How are you trying to move from point A to point B? And then we come in to help provide that structured format for that training. So within Minnesota, this dual training program has legislative funding. And currently right now, there is a grant available for employers to apply for to support beginning these programs. So at South Central College, we've been fortunate to partner with many businesses on this, and it's an exciting opportunity. It eliminates the financial risk that might preclude you from wanting to step into this area. But really, we can come out and help you with that process. The Minnesota Pipeline Program is more than happy to do so as well. So I do not work for the Pipeline Program. I will put that out there. But work-based learning is part of my role at SCC. The nice thing about this program is it can align with a community college program. It can align with customized workforce education. It can align with a bachelor's degree. It can align with a master's degree. So there is no box, but there are some occupations that the state has identified that are eligible for this grant application. And so I did bring a flyer. There's 12 occupations in ag. If you Google Minnesota Dual Training Pipeline, it will pop right up. So that can be the link that you click on and it will take you. There's 4 industries Minnesota is focused on, and ag is one of those. So within those occupations, you have things like ag finance lender, application technician, swine technician. So several occupations that I've heard employers I work with where there's a workforce demand and need. You might ask, why do I want to do apprenticeship or dual training? And there is a return on investment for employers. So apprenticeship is a nationally driven model, international model. There is data to back up the ROI that you can get from this program. One example is for every dollar invested, $1.47 comes back to the company. And that's because it is not only a recruitment model, but it is a retention model. So when we talk about the gaps that technology might be covering in the upskilling of employers or employees, this is an opportunity to do that as well. So it can help you recruit new employees. It can help you retain current employees. There's data behind that as well. Nationally, it's shown that 91% of apprentices stay with their company after 9 months of completing the program. So in a world where there are plenty of incentives to jump from company A to company B, this is something that's showing you're willing to invest in your workforce. The other primary benefit that's touched on is it's an equity-based approach. And so as we look at recruiting diverse populations, underrepresented students and learners, this removes barriers for those learners to go back to school or to get some additional training for their job. The grant that you apply for will cover their tuition, fees, books, and any required materials for up to $6,000. And so when you talk about students who live a different life than what I lived, I worked full-time and went to school. I did not have a family at home. I did not have childcare or transportation needs, but those are all very relevant barriers for many of our students and our employees, and this helps eliminate those barriers for them. And so as you look at recruiting your workforce and finding different people to fill those needs, apprenticeship can help you do that. So that's my quick spiel. I did leave a flyer, like I said. I also have my card. So if you have additional questions about it, I'm more than willing to answer that now or later. And the pipeline program contact is also on the flyer. So if you want to reach out directly to them, you can as well. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Nice job. It's a program that's been out there for quite a few years, but we've noticed that agriculture does not utilize it as well as some of the other industries. And so the grant application is limited time frame. And so I encourage you now, and seeing the application, it's one of the easier grants that I've seen. So don't let that fool you that you're concerned about what a grant would look like. So please do follow up with Kelsey or myself if you have any questions. Those of you online, same thing, send questions in or your email contact, and we can follow up with you on the details of that. You know, that's really the beauty of this report and the release, is also to share the data, but also share real solutions or real people's insights why we do this. And when we've seen the talent conversation component coming up, and then what businesses are offering today, from the more flexibility, but also some of the unique things of even product dollars for their employees if they're there. But this is another solution to hopefully help out those employers with the rising costs of employeeship, but also take the time to invest in their future, because there's only one thing worse than training an employee, investing in them and seeing them leave. It's not investing in your employee and seeing them stay. So invest in your workforce, and for the long run, you'll be in better shape than not investing and concerned about them leaving. So next, what's really important is we talk about the state of ag. I mean, we are talking the whole state. You've seen our demographics of where we're getting the survey, where we're getting focus groups done from. And a big part of that is the support that we've received with the Department of Ag and the partnership that we've had since GreenSeam started. And so really honored and pleased to introduce Commissioner Tom Peterson of Minnesota Department of Agriculture, was able to join us here today and share some thoughts of what he has, of what he's seeing in the industry, what calls he's getting, what the future also lies, because a part of this report isn't always about what the challenges are today, but where's this industry growing? Because our students and our businesses want to know that this is a good place or a good industry to be working in. And so we're excited about also leveraging that opportunity. So with that, welcome Tom Peterson.
Well, thanks, Sam, and what a distinguished group of thinkers we have here. This is great to see everybody, and really interesting. Actually, happy Ag Day, and it's great to do something like this on Ag Day. It's been a really crazy day at the Capitol. We had a drought bill passed our Senate Finance Committee at 8:30 this morning. We hosted a lot of groups at the Capitol, the Farm Bureau, soybean growers, working on our budget bill. It's just been a really busy day. A lot of our staff are in other parts of the state doing Ag Day celebrations, but it just always shows how important agriculture is in the state of Minnesota. I think one of the things I'm always really proud about, it's not just that we're home to so many of the great companies, whether it's, Cargill and CHS and Land O'Lakes and General Mills, and you can just go on and on, Hormel, all the companies we have in Minnesota, all the farmers we have. The interesting thing about Minnesota, 67,400 farms, is that really, if you look at our cash receipts in Minnesota, we really balance evenly compared to other states of both crops and livestock, and so I think that's really interesting. Billions of dollars, 7-8 billion, always one way or another every year on crops and livestock. So it just shows all the integrated things and opportunities we have. I am actually encouraged, I say this slightly, we only lost 100 farms last year in our count. We've been losing 500 to 1,000 a year. We have less farms to lose, but we've slowed that trend maybe a little bit. Prices help and everything. But I think a lot of the different things that we have in our state, whether it's a beginning farmer tax credit, beginning farmer loans, we have a way better suite of options than other parts of the country. In fact, when I go and I do like our national conferences and everything, they want us to present on the options and things that we have here in Minnesota. So I just really always am optimistic about that, trying to keep people on the farm. And then just agriculture in general. It's kind of interesting on technology. I was running a little behind today. It was raining, traffic. I was able to listen to all the students and different things on, put my Bluetooth on, listen to Facebook Live on the way down and caught this. And as I travel the state, and I've traveled the state a lot. In fact, I've been in this area like 3 times in the last week and a half, visiting with companies and others to just see like what do they need? What are they interested in? And so it is interesting to look at how healthcare rose to the top, right now, but like people and infrastructure. I have a senior, I have a junior, and it's always been interesting to them to say like the options, like they don't necessarily want to be a farmer, one of them maybe, but one of them, he wants to work in agriculture and something, but the jobs are just amazing. I've told them, like, if you really want, go into HR right now. Like, you just look at all the agencies, companies that are really working on HR, but all the companies that we look and want to expand in Minnesota and grow, and we're just seeing tremendous growth in Minnesota. You look at our surplus we have in their state, it's just our economy's really driving. But I look at it as our own agency. And it very much meshes with how we look in the state and the companies that I see when I travel around the state. At Department of Ag, we have about 500 employees. We have a few seasonal employees, but we're like rotating. I hate to open my email sometimes on Monday mornings because I have to sign an e-card for somebody who's retiring or moving on to a different opportunity. It's just a lot of flux. And at the same time, I'll say, oh man, I can't believe that person's retiring. And then a few weeks later, a month later, I'll be like, oh, I can't believe we got that person to come to the Department of Agriculture. So it's kind of really just people are moving around right now. We have to look, and it's hard as a state agency to say like, okay, how can we be attractive? How can we be the preferred employer? How do we attract young people to come to the department and want to work at the department? Flexible work schedules. It's interesting to see, like, I like telework. I don't like telework. A lot of our employees do, but a lot of them like to come in. We've redone like our buildings to allow for like what we call like the hotel spaces, and our employees love that as they've been coming back into the office. They like to come in 2-3 days a week. They have like, they bring their computer, the picture of their kids, they set up and go. And they get the camaraderie. Some divisions, they'll say, okay, we're all coming in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we get that. And that seems to really, those type of things are really taking off. So trying to be competitive, trying to look at what are those options to getting people in and then retaining people. But we also, I've seen a trend, and we're talking to other bigger ag companies, even in the Twin Cities, Rochester area, others, for jobs where you can work at home on the farm. People can move back to the farm and live in the country, which I think is a good thing. For the Department of Agriculture, we've had many employees move from the Twin Cities back out to a small town. We just have our new person that's working on county fairgrounds, lived in Bloomington's, able to move back to this area to work from this area for the department. She has to come in 1 day a week, but that was a deal breaker. That's how we got her in. And so we're trying to be as creative as possible. I know a lot of companies are, and just trying to look at that and alleviate that. So all those workforce jobs, that's going to continue to be a trend as we come out of COVID, and trying to be as competitive as possible. And so very excited and looking at all those options, and interesting just to hear the ideas that they have. And then the other thing I just say in the state ag and looking at that, the first thing, bottom line for me, is prices are good for farmers. Like prices I looked at milk prices today, corn prices, wheat prices are great. And that's good. We talked to our farm advocates who work with our farmers, our mediators. The farmers' balance sheets have never been better for a long time. And that means farmers have capital, they have money to invest. And but farmers are a little wary, and they should be, because the flip side is our inputs are, and that's Kevin and others are high, very, very high, and so looking at that, I'm actually more worried about next year. When I talk to farmers, they've kind of already decided what they're planning this year. A lot of farmers have locked in their fertilizer. It's high, but they have it. But I think we're really going to have to watch it with the Ukrainian Russia situation and everything else that goes on. Our world food supply, is the longer that this goes on, the more it's going to really affect us. I've been talking with Cargill and some of our other companies and looking at what's the long-term impact going to be? And so the Ukraine and Russia play into Minnesota quite a bit. One other side note, we get a lot of Ukrainian workers here too for our fruit and vegetable. We're not the biggest producer of that, but we do have 3,000 farms in Minnesota that that grow fruit and vegetables, and our bigger ones really do have not just, used to be a lot of Latino workers, but in the last few years, they've been adding a lot of Ukrainian workers. And so some farms where they may have up to 20 Ukrainian workers are maybe at 2 or 3. And they, have to look at other options. Men cannot leave. And so that's a really big issue. It's kind of an interesting side note, but on the agriculture in general too, we started going back into the public to trade and to do our trade missions. The governor and I went to the United Kingdom and to Finland, and that was really interesting just to get back. Trading is very transactional. Trade is people want to be in person. It was great. We did during COVID, we did a lot of Zoom trade missions, but just not the same. Like seeing, meeting people, making those connections. But everybody wants us right now. We have requests to go to Taiwan, Philippines, North Africa. We have a lot of just great options right now for the department. I think the United Kingdom and Finland were very interesting countries because they, are moving away from direct payments to farmers and moving more towards payments that are tied to the environment or sustainable farming practices, which are going to be very interesting to how that will impact their farmers. So they're actually probably going to need more imports from us. Our big imports to them are kidney beans, navy beans, things like that, but they're also looking at soybean meal and others. I always think it's interesting, if you look at the UK and you look at Finland, they're about the same size geographically as Minnesota. Finland, we have 5.7 million people. Finland has 5.5 million people, but the UK has almost 70 million people. So they are obviously a much bigger buyer, purchaser from us. I like the statistic they gave us when we met with their department. They said if they had to feed all their people, they would run out of food on August 11th every year. So it shows like how important this trade is. But I just thought the sustainability thing is really important and going to provide a lot of opportunities for us in the future. They were very interested in our water quality certification program we have at the department, where we're getting close to 1 million acres in farmers, because their customers want to tell, how is that corn produced? We're competing in South America. And are there things that we're doing here that's going to make us or give us an edge on our product? So that was very interesting. The other thing was plant-based products. A lot of people get nervous when I say that. Somebody who's raised cattle in my life, I thought that was really interesting. But in general, people are just looking at protein in general. And those also are going to be interesting discussions and provide opportunities for us. So in general, I just appreciate the opportunity to visit with you a few minutes. And I think, the state of agriculture is really strong right now in Minnesota, but there are some concerns, as we look at workforce, infrastructure, whether that's daycare, childcare, and other options that we can look at, continuing to move our trade forward. And so I'm really excited and optimistic, but also watching out. One last thing I just mentioned is for this area is animal disease is a very top priority for the Department of Agriculture. Right now, if you would have gone back 2 months ago, our big concern was African swine fever, which has decimated China's hog herd and tipped it upside down. At the same time, providing a lot of opportunities for us as long as we can maintain that. But it's knocking on our door now in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And the longer and the better job we can do with that, but we have to have resources and we have to be prepared. Now we're staring down avian influenza, much similar to 2015, where we had a huge hit to especially our turkey industry. Minnesota's #1 turkey state in the nation, but it's all around us. Wisconsin, one of their biggest farms, Iowa, one of their biggest farms, South Dakota is getting more and more cases every day. We're seeing more wild birds right now contracting this, and we're getting a lot of reports of dead birds. And so that is another thing that we also have to keep always on high alert on. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I just want to thank Sam and GreenSeam. I'm anxious to dig into the report a little bit more, and I know our staff is too. We do use things like this as a resource when we're looking and setting out different projects that we have to help guide us. And so just great to be here, Sam, and I'll turn it back over to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Big round of applause for making the journey out here and sharing those insights with us, because I think they are important, that we do have big hurdles in front of us, but there are also some big opportunities from those things. And so it's awesome when you see the Department of Ag getting back out on these trade missions and delegations, bringing the governor with and other things, because they do impact our state as we export a lot of crops, goods, animals, different proteins, fuel. List goes on of what ag in Minnesota does. So it's pretty exciting with that. I do want to thank a few folks here, because there's a lot of people owed for this. This isn't a big project where we raise a bunch of money and do it all ourselves. This is a project by partnership. This project originally started with the GreenSeam committees saying we need to understand some issues deeper, and we need to understand what our businesses here have in front of them that they're facing, or what that they're seeing, so we can make sure we adapt ours. And it turned into this grander project to say, no, we don't need it just for ourselves. We need the information to be able to share with others to use. And so our business retention and expansion committee, which I know there's a few of you members here in the room, hats off to really looking at these questions and figuring out which ones we should be asking, how do we ask the question the right way. And so I think they deserve a round of applause. Another thing to think about that I was going to say here right after Tom got done is there's 5 sectors to an economy. The number one sector is natural resources, which in our region, it's the production of food, animals, proteins, fuels, right? And so that being the first sector has more ripple effect than any other sector. And I think that's an important part, that when we bring up what are the threats or what are the opportunities, the next line of companies is your manufacturing, your engineering. And then we have professional services and development. And then we have education in there, and research, and government is a sector of our economy. And we are really good at all of those sectors in Minnesota. And you can look across the US or look across the world and go, there's some countries that have really good production, but they're failing at 1, 2, or 3 of those other sectors. And so that's why it's important to look at this and then take a look from your own business standpoint, because these things might come to you or might ripple to you in the future, both negatively, but also positively. It sure wouldn't be possible without our host facility here to do this in this brand new remodeled facility here at Farmamerica. So if you get the chance, look around, check out this. I mean, this is amazing. And if you online can see it, that would be awesome as well. But stop in at Farmamerica here right outside of Waseca, bring your kids here. There's a lot of exciting stuff to do. So thank you to the Farmamerica team, Jessica and team. We appreciate it. Next on my list to thank is this research and work, as Shane alluded to earlier, was done by the team, by Dr. Shane Boyer in the College of Business. It was done with support of his students, but it was also done by the ability to have that time designated to do this type of work. And so thanks to the College of Business Dean, Dr. Brenda Flannery, and that entire group to take this. But next on the list is surely these individuals that said, hey, we're going to dive in and help you however we need to. If we need to send the survey out, if we need to put a focus group together, or if we need to be hands-on, what's the way that we can help? And so Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce hosted a focus group, which was fantastic. Minnesota State Southern Center of Excellence, and Megan is here. And so if anybody wants to talk to Megan, you can follow up afterwards. But they've been a part of this program since we started 3 years ago with Brad Slusher and others in the room that were key to kind of getting this off the ground. We have the Northern Center of Excellence, Ag-Centric. We have University of Minnesota College of Food, Ag, Natural Resource Sciences alumni, Minnesota Ag and Rural Leadership Program, Agri-Growth Council, and Ag Utilization Research Institute, along with even Minnesota Wheat Growers Association was at the table supporting us. So, and getting the word out, information. So in the future, we always look forward to partnering with somebody to have a focus group or to get the survey out, and we'd love to work with you on that. So if it interests you or your organization, make sure you reach out to us. With that, this really concludes our, hybrid release here of being in person and being online. So thank you, viewers that are on Facebook Live, or those that might be watching it here in the upcoming days. And thank you, those that are in the room. You can go watch it or rewatch it on Facebook Live in the future, and then all the report will be live on our website. If you need hard copies of it, or if you need a link to put it on your website or send it out in your social media or whatnot, let our group know. We have a great team here. But before I do let go, the one person that did a ton of this work that deserves some recognition is Garrett Lifering. So Garrett is program manager for GreenSeam. He's been with us just over a year, and he really dove into making sure there was accuracy and working with Dr. Boyer and pulling a lot of this stuff together. And so appreciate that, Garrett. So with that, thank you for those online joining, and those in person, stick around. We're going to have a little happy hour, and you can ask us questions in person. Be glad to dive into the report. We got a couple of the full reports, hard copies here with us. And those on the online, please do ask questions in Facebook or reach out to our office, and we'll try to follow up with a response to some of those details you might have. So thanks, everybody.